some bands almost pretend to already have the fame at the local level, and some have already developed the ego, and just don't really,
just don't.
Yeah, I'm not going to go down that route, but it just, there's a lot of communication and just etiquette and working with people on both sides of that show.
I mean, other than Lords of the Trident, who is the best band of all time?
We didn't teach him that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Words of Fang. We are here again at the Between the Waves Music Conference, btwmadison.com. It's in June. You've already missed it. I'm so sorry, but you've already missed it. But you can come next year. So many amazing speakers, so many amazing people. And some of my favorite people go up to 11. And so we have on the show today 11. The entirety of 11. You guys want to introduce yourselves? Tell us what 11 is all about.
Matt Jacoby,
Nick Venturella,
and Steve Bannock.
I'm going to leave the nod part out this time. Clap.
And as you can tell here on Words of Fang, we are very well equipped for a 3-person interview. But anyway, tell us about 11. Tell us what you do.
I won't comment on that. The comment I had prepared anyway. So what 11 is the three of us have been working on helping bands in terms of coaching, holding them accountable, and actually working on the business side of their venture, their music venture.
Very cool, very cool. So it's sort of like a coaching sort of a deal.
Yeah, and actually yesterday we had somebody mention something about it, so you're kind of like life coaching because people are getting out of ruts and feeling better about themselves. And just now we were called music therapists, so there's a little bit of that.
Oh, music therapists. I like that.
Although that's an actual thing.
Oh, yeah.
Music therapists, and they actually have to have very strict certifications.
Not licensed.
So we don't want to confuse ourselves with that.
This is number 33.
All right, so let's jump right into it. Is now the best or worst time to be a musician? Your thoughts?
I would say it's one of the best, but there's a downside. The best, I think you have more flexibility than you ever did before. You can be in more control than you've ever had before. You don't have to rely on the major labels like you once did. Radio, I think, is still a hurdle. I think there's a wall there, and in order to get into radio, you kind of need that major industry help. But yeah, that's kind of my thought on it.
I'd say on the worst side, it means more work for a band. They don't get to just hand it off if they get signed anymore. I mean, it's kind of, the DIY approach is probably a little more lucrative, a little bit more, like Steve said, in control. And we just want to make sure that everyone's well equipped to do that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I guess with the advent of, jumping back to your comment, with the advent of Spotify and Pandora and digital streaming, is radio even a thing that a lot of bands are even asking about nowadays?
Well, I think not. Thank you. Not as much as I think they did, in the 90s and stuff. But these days you can easily get your tracks on Spotify and the like. But I still think if you're trying to reach that young audience that's still listening to the radio in the car, that kind of thing. You still have your top 40 and the idea of pop music being broken on the radio, especially in country music and things like that. So, radio does matter in some cases, but like I said earlier, having control of your music and your career, I think, is better now than it's ever been.
I would just add, kind of contrasting that a little bit. I think radio is a great medium still for, especially for certain genres. But even in today's cars, riffing off of what you were just saying there, Steve, people are, they're Bluetooth connected, so they're just doing their own playlists and Spotify. They're not even listening to the radio in many cases. So I think for a musician, while radio could be a really great avenue, and I think there's more access to it now than there used to be because there's so many more options these days. That radio almost has to kind of open up a little bit to compete a little bit with some of these streaming things. But now musicians in some way to stand out really have to hustle more because they kind of have to put themselves out in all these various these paths and platforms and different things like that to saturate themselves in the market so they can get noticed.
Yeah. So ignoring one specific thing may be, do at your own peril.
It could be, but at the same time, that comes back to some of the things that 11 talks about with artists is that know your audience, know who your ideal fans are and things like that. And if they're not a radio crowd necessarily, a top 40 type of crowd, maybe that's not where you put your energy at, you know. So it's a it's a little bit of a complex balance sometimes to figure out what's going to work, and so with that comes a little bit of trial and error. But there are a lot of options, and it's worthwhile to explore them and take advantage and see what works.
Gotcha. So an artist comes to you and they say, "Okay, 11, I want you to be my musical life coaches." And I, you know, I'm ready to sell my house, quit my job, burn my furniture, and go on the road 24/7. What is the first thing that you look at? I see you shaking your head. What is the first thing that you advise, that you look at, that you talk to?
Don't burn your furniture.
Don't burn your furniture.
You're going to need that furniture. No, I mean, what's your plan? That's my first question. What is your goal? What's your plan? Because if you don't have those two things sorted out, this is going to be a train wreck. So, you know, that's how we get to know potential clients, is by kind of asking them those questions to get to know them. So,
yeah, we kind of have an assessment process where we want to learn more. We want to be inside their head, understand where they're coming from, what their actual aspirations are. Because if they're not in it wholeheartedly themselves, they need to understand why to begin with, and then really being able to say, okay, this is where you are, this is where you want to be. How do we get there?
Yeah, and what. So all of this sort of stuff that you guys do is tailored specifically for their specific goals. You know, so some people might want to go tour on the road 24/7. Some people might want to live at home. You guys tailor your services or your coaching for that, right?
Yeah, we're starting wherever they are. So it is their career, a musician's career, and so wherever they are and wherever it is they want to go. And I think that's what we find is often most difficult for a lot of musicians, is them internally identifying, where do I want to go? Where, you know, I have this sort of concept of what I would like to have happen, but you know, have I realistically thought through I can get there, that like this is an actual reality I could get to? I just need to back up from the end goal and start building a plan for it.
Right. What's one thing that you would, one piece of advice that you would give to people to up their live show game? Or perhaps maybe what's one thing that you see a bunch of bands doing incorrectly when they play live?
I got something.
Go for it. I need to process that one for a minute.
Yeah.
One of the things and this comes just because, you know, as a musician myself, playing live shows, you know, I'm always trying to tweak what works, what doesn't work. But something I see with a lot of other bands, especially younger bands, is just building a rapport with their audience while they're playing. Sometimes they're shoegazers and they're playing their music and they're very, you know, it's very good, and their art is great, but they're missing. They're not leaping over the chasm that is building that rapport with their audience and bringing their audience into their show, inviting them to have an experience, and then capitalizing on that experience. So asking for the sale in the sense of, hey, one of the lines I always use is, hey, if you like my music and you want to take me home later, you can do so. Purchase an album over here.
That's
or whatever. You know, I always clarify, you can take me home on a recording.
Yeah.
But I mean, just, and it's humorous, you know, so people remember it. So things like that, just understanding that they're in business and that if they're going to put on a great live show, they got to have the music down, but then invite their audience to be part of that experience. And then as they're enjoying that experience, the audience, you've got them. So let them know how they can support you. And a lot of folks, I think, want to that are attending those kinds of shows because they enjoy the music. And if they're into it, they're probably going to throw a couple bucks at you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to follow on that is like the audience interaction piece, right? Like understanding where your opportunities lie as a band. It's not just about the music. I mean, they're there to see you and your music, but there's so many other things about you that they could potentially like and they don't even know. You know, merch is an important aspect of that, and contests and things like that, and you know, exclusive access to content, you know, all these kind of things. So, and you can push some of that on your live show, you know, mention it between songs or whatever, and just engage with your audience a little deeper than it's not just about the music. There's more to it. You know?
Along those same lines, I think just being present for audience and the venue. I mean, it comes down to having the relationship building with the venue and the etiquette and the communication. And this probably applies more to younger bands, although I'm sure there is plenty of veterans out there who are still chopping up that tree. But yeah, and then building the relationship, of course. I think some bands almost pretend to already have the fame at the local level, and some have already developed the ego, and just don't really,
just don't.
Yeah, I'm not going to go down that route, but it just, there's a lot of communication and just etiquette and working with people on both sides of that show.
I mean, other than Lords of the Trident, who is the best band of all time?
We didn't teach him that.
Yeah, not from us. No, one last thing I would say just for the live show is get there early as an artist.
Yeah.
Mingle with the people who came out to see you. If you take breaks in the middle of the set or whatever.
And the bartender and the
owner
and everything.
Everyone you meet, be cordial. Don't have an ego. Because someone long ago told me once, it's really not about your music, but how easy you are to work with people. And if you're able to be cordial and easy to work with and take your ego out of it, you're going to go a long way just by doing that. So, and then do what you say you're going to do. Like if you follow up, that's going to take you really far.
Yeah. So a lot of artists nowadays need to be focused on a DIY aesthetic. Need to invest time into that. What's something that you think that every band out there should DIY at least once, just for the experience?
Touring in a van.
That's a great one. I haven't had that one yet, and that is 100% true.
Because it kind of sucks. Because if you get to the hotel and it's overbooked, where are you going to sleep? And you thought you were going to be at the hotel, so you're going to sleep in the van. If it's a 15-passenger van, one person's going to go on the floor, one's going to go on the, how are you going to do that? Vanning, it sucks. Maybe the nicer, newer vans you don't, but yeah. Try it.
No, you do.
Yeah. Okay.
And I sort of laughed and died a little internally when you said when you get to the hotel. I'm like,
oh well, right.
Yeah,
or just sleeping in the van.
I was say Chris Farley taught us a lot about that. Just sleeping in your van down by the river. So.
Yeah. You have an answer?
I haven't thought of one yet. Please
come back to no. That was my answer.
That was your answer. Yeah. Well, I would just say all of it. I mean, if you've never booked a show, I'll go back a little bit. So I feel like most musicians who are DIY musicians make the best business and marketing people. And like if they go on to do other like corporate jobs or whatever, they have all this experience. So you think about it, you're really doing everything. So you're creating the art, you're creating the product, you're creating the brand, the experience, and then you're putting that out there, and then you're selling your merch, and you're selling yourself and what you do, and then you're earning some level of income out of that. That's a business, and that experience is invaluable in anything you do. It doesn't even have to be related to music. That's just living in a capitalistic society that will help you. So I would just say that holistically, if you can do anything and everything at least once, put out your own press release, put out your own whatever, do your own income and expenses and taxes and see how that goes before you hire an accountant. Get a feel for it.
To Nick's point, I would say the exact same thing now that you've said it, of course. But
that's typical.
Typical, whatever. I have no words for myself. But no, I forgot what I was going to say. Thanks a lot.
I can add to that by saying going through and doing all things yourself at least once. By doing that, you can understand if you have to hire that out to somebody, what's necessary if you're interviewing somebody that's going to become your bookkeeper. Well, I kind of know what's going on versus if you didn't and you just, you seem like you know bookkeeping, come on in. Well, that's not a good approach.
Why do I not have any income?
Right, where'd my money go? So why is it so sloppy receipts, counting, and
being audited by the IRS again?
So
why is that?
Yeah, so if you at least know how to do it a little bit, and then you also find out what you're good at and you could do yourself versus what you don't care about or you'd rather not do, and you can outsource that stuff.
I'm sorry, Steve reminded me what my answer was, and that was it.
I'm
out.
All right. Well, is there something that you think that bands should not DIY?
That's a better question.
They're instruments.
Probably.
Oh, wait. Wait, not outsource. My bad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it kind of comes back to knowing yourself, like what you are good at. I mean, I would say it's probably good to make an attempt at any aspect of it at least once. But if you quickly find out that that's just not in your wheelhouse and it's not you, and you know yourself well enough to know you can't do it, or there are other options that make it affordable enough to do it elsewhere. And I would just say, like, say T-shirts, for example. Yeah, you can screen print your own T-shirts. I mean, you guys do that.
Oh yeah,
I've done that. Had the Friday, the Thursday night before the show party at the house and screen print. But that may not be something people have time or energy to do, or even a desire to do, or know how to do. And there's so many options now online where you can get things printed and shipped to the show or anything like that. But I think it does come back to, I think you should have an understanding of how it works, even if you're not going to do it. So that was my roundabout way to not answer your question directly.
Good.
I'll just admit that.
So, I mean, the only thing that popped into my mind there is, like, let's say you've been asked to do a gig that maybe you shouldn't be doing, right? Like, maybe a wedding band. You're not a wedding band, but you're asked to play in a wedding, and you didn't prepare or something, and you get there and you realize you're getting all these requests for songs. Geez, if we would have practiced a little more, or thought about this through a little, you don't want to if it's not a good match, decline it. But there's a way to decline it, is tap your network and find that right wedding band, and not on, you build that relationship, you get them the gig, and they're going to pay you back one day by helping you out. So this community is so small, and it's network and personality built, and help them. We might not be the right band for you, but let me help you find that, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, always. I always hear this from mentor people that I admire. Provide solutions, and I think that's what you're really getting at. So if you're not the answer, and we're getting a little off track here on the question.
That's okay. That's all right.
Be a solution provider. So yeah, and even 11, we may not be a fit for a particular artist, and we would probably tell you that after having a conversation. Probably. But we would we would tell you that after a conversation if we didn't feel like we could add value. But what we would try to do is tap our network to see where we could put you in a direction where you could get value, and that's invaluable.
Yeah.
I concur.
Sweet.
So you guys, 11 in general, I kind of see as, if I had to give a one word or a hyphenated word pitch, I'd say mini managers, right? For a band, for an artist. Is there any vestiges of the old industry, be it labels, be it booking agents, be it managers, that you think are still very important to have in today's industry?
Well, I think managers are the right manager at the right time. I think a lot of, like, producers, I come from the producer community, so they think they need a manager in order to get placements, right? And it's like, well, first of all, any manager worth his salt is not going to spend any time on you if he's never even heard of you, because he can't just open doors for you. Well, he probably could, he or she, but it's you need a manager. You need the right manager at the right time. But I think some people approach that too early. They think you're just not ready. You'll know when you're ready because you need management.
Well, and I would tap into something that I think you said earlier too, is doing it yourself, having that DIY ethos, and managing your own, riffing off the manager aspect, managing your own affairs and bookings and all that kind of thing, and then getting to a point where you're just too busy to be able to do it yourself, and you start to realize that I'm actually not doing as good of a job at this anymore because I'm too busy. Maybe now is the time to hire someone to do that. But I would agree. I think a manager can be really useful from sort of the old record industry days. That's still valid.
I would consider any of those probably still valid positions to have. But in the case of what we'd probably share is that they're business milestones. You're gonna be like, okay, we get to a point where, okay, I've reached that plateau. Now I need to actually learn. It's almost like having a small business. Well, it is a small business, but having employees. It's like, okay, I've maxed out. I need to hire someone to get me to growth to the next step. So it's almost a step process, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. There's so many things you can outsource these days too. That, you can contract for it. But again, I think having some level of knowledge to understand it enough to realize I need someone else to do this.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part. That's where we can help come into with a lot of artists, is just sort of spitballing that and figuring out where you're at and where you want to get to, and when does it make sense to be thinking about those things.
Yeah, and it can be difficult to outsource too, because your art and everything is so near and dear to your heart, and here you are basically giving that piece to someone, and you really got to trust that person. Trust is huge. I mean, especially when it comes down to money. It can be difficult to establish those relationships, but it obviously happens.
Gotcha.
And that's actually how most small businesses grow anyway, because it's almost like you work in that position yourself for a while, and then you almost are putting together either mentally or documenting like a playbook and then passing it off to someone because you don't want to let that baby go.
The last thing I would say is I think record labels, back in the day, they did all this, for artists, all these various elements that they still do to some extent, but the reach of hitting a major label is maybe a little bit out of reach for most, and it's not necessary for a lot of musicians, and I would not recommend that being the first goal for most genres of music. But that's what we're trying to help teach is all these aspects that a major label might have touched on or done for an artist. We want to help educate and work together with an artist to help them understand why it's important and either how they can do it themselves or when it's time to start looking elsewhere to outsource that.
Gotcha. All right. Finally, if you guys had to pick each your favorite tip, or maybe the 11 tip for each of you that you're giving to a bunch of bands over and over, maybe the favorite thing for you to say, what would that be?
I concur.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whatever you say.
Set goals and be consistent.
Yeah. Did you concur?
I didn't think about it much until I saw our friends in Gin, Chocolate, and Bottle Rockets, but I really like their purpose statement. Knowing why you do what you do. We don't necessarily use this as an 11 statement yet, but know why you're doing what you're doing, and everything that you do will tie back to that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would reiterate with just having a plan, and I think I said it before. I think knowing where you want to go is one of the hardest things to tackle, because a lot of times you get involved in music, you start playing, maybe you're playing in a group or something, and it organically develops over time, and it kind of evolves, and all of a sudden you're playing some shows, you're making a little income, and now you're in a van touring and whatever else, and you still like the people you're playing with, and it evolves, and then it's just like, okay, well, now what do we do? Like, what do we do with this? We got something good going here. So I think just reflecting and being like, this is where I want to go, and then to your point, you're setting goals, you're building a plan, and I think that's the overarching concept that will take people pretty far if you're willing to put in the work. That's the other thing. You got to take action. It's a hustle. It's a grind. It's not. No one's going to do it for you.
Gotcha. Well, guys, thank you so much for sitting down with me. Let everybody know where they can find 11 if they are an artist that needs mini management, needs some music life coaches. Let them know how they can find you, where they can hit you up.
You can go to turnupto11.com, and I do believe all of our social media channels are also just turnup211. So Facebook, Instagram, and I think that's all we're doing right now.
Yeah, at the moment. Yep. Yeah. Turnup211.com.
Turnup211.com. And hey, if you guys want to see the entire uncut interview, including all of the I concurs from Matt, give us a buck on Patreon, patreon.com/Lords of the Trident. We will have not only this video uncut, but every other interview we do this entire weekend, a whole treasure trove of advice for just $1. Patreon.com/Lords of the Trident. So keep watching. Thank you. And thank you guys for being here. And we will see you all next time.